Hello. It looks like I am live. Welcome everyone to the Music Masterclass today, January 7th, 2020. And I'm just getting my things all lined up here. So give me a moment to get back to where I was. I got a whole bunch of stuff kind of queued up to want to talk about. Um, so again, this is my weekly series of classes where I talk about some different aspects of making music, do some demonstrations, look at some of you guys' music, and that's kind of what we'll be doing today. So it's great to see great to see faces here, or at least names, and from all over the world, including people who for whom this is the middle of the night. So again, apologize for the time, but it's hard to pick a time that works everywhere in the world. So, yeah, I hope everyone had a nice last couple of weeks, having, Christmas, New Year's, holidays, all the different things going on. And what I'm going to do, I will absolutely encourage questions on really any topic about music. Just feel free to just start typing in the chat and we can go wherever. But I do have a few specific things that I want to talk about, some music that I want to show you that people have submitted. Um, and just see what we can all learn together. What I want to start with is looking at since before the last session I did was just before Christmas, and then since then we also had um, New Year's. I did an arrangement of Auld Lang Syne, and I'm going to play that real briefly for you. And then I'm going to play one that was submitted by one of the students here, Jeff. And I don't know if you're here, and I never know until the last minute what I'm going to be showcasing. So I'm sorry if I don't give people notice the way I probably could if I had a better organization scheme. But in any case, I'm going to play you my arrangement here and then play you Jeff. Very, very different, not even comparable in any way. This is the latest in that series that I was talking about when I was doing these Christmas songs, where I kind of decided on a scheme in which I would do an interesting reharmonization that would, use the techniques that I talk about in my harmony course, which I recommend highly. Um, but the harmony course, I talk about secondary dominance, talk about borrowed chords, talk about all these different techniques for creating chord progressions. And I wanted to use a lot of that technique, a lot of that language that's such fundamental language in classical music, jazz, popular music. It's just really fundamental in Western music. But also, I wanted to make this still somehow be reasonably singable. I wanted to push the boundaries, but still be reasonably singable. Um, and ideally to do it in only one harmony part. In other words, a melody and one harmony part. And then, yeah, if you throw a bass that's mostly doing the roots of the chords, that can fill things out. And one of actually the most successful ones that I did. So if you didn't hear it, you're about to. If you did, you're going to hear it again. So there you have it. This harmonization uses all of the standard devices that you hear me talk about over and over and over. So I turned the volume down, and hopefully you could still hear it because I remember now that you're hearing the computer audio and my speakers because I don't have my headphones on because I don't feel like it. And and also because they're over across the room. I'd have to get up to put them on. So hopefully the audio works okay. Question, union pay. I don't actually know what that is, Howard. So contact me offline, and I have no control over the whole way that payment scheme works. But if there's something that I need to figure out how to make work for China, we'll figure it out. Um, So, yeah, my harmonization has all these different things: secondary dominance, borrowed chords, a tritone substitution, or augmented sixth chord, depending on how you prefer to view these things. Some diminished chords, all this sort of language. Um, and it's packed in pretty tight. I mean, the original harmonization would have a little of that, but nowhere near as much. What I want to show you now is an arrangement done uh, by Jeff, and I somewhere I saw oh, Jeff Davis. There you go. And so this does something that you would think is sort of a no-brainer, but I have to say I don't know that I've ever heard it before, and that is using a bagpipe for the melody. I mean, Auld Lang Syne is a Scottish song, or at least the poem is a Scottish poem. So let's I'm going to start this playing, and I am going to grab my headphones while it plays. But yeah, you're going to hear the melody done in bagpipe, and then you're going to hear a choral arrangement after that. And I think they work well together, and I want to talk about a couple things about it. So let's hear it, and that'll be our tribute to the new year. And there you have it. This is Jeff's arrangement. It's really nice. I really enjoy it. And so a couple of things that I want to talk about regarding this arrangement here is, well, really uh, the most important thing to talk about is just the concept of it, right? I mean, if you think about my arrangement, I had a very specific concept I was going for. Let's have a interesting harmonization that really kind of pushes some boundaries within the realm of what I was doing, but try to state those harmonies using only two voices and having that second voice. I can sing that. I can sing that thing. And I'm not a singer, as you all know. So that was my goal. I can state it in words. I think, not to put words in Jeff's mouth here, but I can kind of state what seem to be goals here. One is, hey, let's honor the Scottish heritage of this song by having a bagpipe actually play the melody over a drone, which is, of course, the standard thing that bagpipes might do. I'll come back and talk about the notation of the bagpipes in a minute because I'm only somewhat familiar with it, and I would love to see if other people here maybe know more about it than I do, which is not a whole lot. So part of the concept here was to use this bagpipe arrangement. The other concept is that eventually we're going to bring in this choral arrangement, and the choral arrangement feels fairly traditional, but it's not like the absolute standard arrangement, right? This is not the if you look this up in a hymnal or something, not that it's a hymn, but whatever, if you found a basic SATB arrangement of it, this is not it. And there's a number of things about it that are sort of unique and interesting. Um, it's using a lot of the harmonic language that I'm talking about, but not pushing it nearly as far. It's pushing it a little bit further than maybe the most traditional arrangements, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the other sort of conceptual thing happening here is, hey, let's have this thing be mostly a cappella once the choir comes in, but let's use these bells here. let's use that. And he's actually bringing in with a typical kind of church bell clock tower type of thing sound on it. And so the piece is essentially unaccompanied uh, until it brings in that bell figure again. Then it brings in an organ also doing the accompaniment. So when I talk about having a concept of what's going on here, think about the overall pacing. Started off with just the introductory bagpipe, and I could totally imagining this being performed with the bagpipe, coming walking in from the aisles, right, and it being a procession sort of thing. Um, but and then having the focus on having these bells come in, and then the focus on the choir, and then bringing the rest of the instruments in, bringing the bells back in, and bringing the organ in. So this idea that you have sort of a concept of what's happening and the pacing of the arrangement, rather than saying, like in my piece, well, I've just got a piece for three voices, by gosh, and it's three voices all the way through. My concept was different than that, right? My concept was more about the detail, measure by measure, not the big picture thing, other than what I wanted to do harmonically. Jeff's version is much more talking about this big picture of how the parts fit together and how the whole thing kind of builds to, from a simple statement of just melody against drone to the full statement that we get here. So having these things here, um, uh, having what was I going to say? Having that sort of idea of what's going on is really kind of important, because it's so easy to lose track of that, especially if you're composing directly into notation software. I mean, obviously, I'm the MuseScore guy, right? And I do a lot of composing, uh, and I do more of it than I would care to admit directly into MuseScore, because I'm usually one of these people telling you, no, don't do that. Don't compose directly into your notation software. Compose devoid of hearing actual sounds as much as you can, so that you can uh, you know, really imagine what the sound is going to be and come up with the next sound you want based on your perfect picture in your head of what that sound you just created was, rather than the approximation that you got fumbling around trying to enter it into MuseScore, or even trying to play it on the piano. If you're trying to write a choir piece, imagine what that choir actually sounds like. Imagine what it actually sounds like when those bells come in. You want to really be hearing that in your head as you're composing, and not the computer playback, not the piano playback. I mean, yeah, there's no getting around the fact that we need to hear these things when we're composing, but I'm always going to be advising you as much as possible to use your own inner ear for this sort of thing. So, and it's especially important. The reason I brought it up here is, as soon as you set up a score and it's got seven instruments or however many instruments it is, there's going to be this tendency to just use all the instruments all the time because they're there. And it's really kind of important to take a step back and think, no, wait a minute. Which instruments do I really want to hear right now at this moment, given the overall picture that I have for the piece? I got to keep flipping over to the chat here. So yeah, so I that bell intro there. I mean, I don't know where it comes from. I just associate it with clock towers in general. Does it come from Big Ben? Maybe. Right. That's. I just think of that as the typical clock bell sound. But yeah, maybe it originally, was written for Big Ben. Someone else would have to do some research and let us know about that. Um, So, and these tubular bells. This is the American term for it. I think other countries use other terms, but they're big hanging pipes, right? A big rack full of brass pipes, and you hit them with mallets. That's what that instrument is. There, I know they're called by other names. Um, cool. All right. You've got a version, Chela. I don't know. I'm going to just guess on people's names, and yes, I remember you from the Envy list. So, great. It's great to have you here. Um, And yeah, I'd be interested to check that out. So it's a cappella trumpet version. Is solo trumpet or is it arranged for like a trumpet ensemble? I'll be kind of curious about that. All right, so I want to get a little deeper inside this arrangement for a second, just to talk about a few things about it. So when I said that it's not your basic harmonization, like right off the bat, I see this G chord here, and yes, I see a G, a G, a D, and a B, and the B is in the bass. So right off the bat, we're getting inversions of this chord. So it is not the standard kind of root position thing that I'd expect. So let's actually listen and see what that sounds like. So pay attention to that bass line. Um, Bum, I'm gonna sing it with you. So, bum, ba, da, da, dum. This is a nice bass line here, but it is not the bass line that would go normally with this chord progression that would normally be more root focused. And in fact, this chord here, this A7, this is a dominant seventh two chord, right? This is 5 of 5. That is not the standard chord there. So he's definitely using some of the harmonic techniques that I talk about, secondary dominance. 5 of 5 here. So 5 of D, and here 5 of 4. G7 is the 5 chord of the 4 chord. Now, I'm talking about this song being in the key of G, and I'm kind of waiting to see if someone's going to point out the thing that I need to point out now is this is in G, but the key signature says D. Uh, the original statement of the melody is in A. So I don't know if he's choosing D as a key signature just to kind of split the difference between A and G, because one has 3 sharps, one has 1 sharp, this has 2 sharps. But I would not have done that. I would recommend that you actually put an A key signature at the beginning, or perhaps no key signature. I don't know what's traditional for bagpipes, to be honest. Um, but put an A key signature at the beginning and then change key to G when the bells come in, basically, and we start hearing the music in G. So, because then the key signature will be agreeing with the music. And it makes certain things easier to understand, like the fact that this A7 is a 5 of 5, it's a secondary dominant. This A7 is not in the key of G, it has a C sharp that we see right there in the alto part. Da, da, da. Yeah, I need my pitch pipe or something. Um, G, A, B, C sharp. There's a C sharp, C sharp, E, D. So that C sharp there is not in the key. I always find it instructive to sing this stuff, even if it would be more practical to play it. It's really instructive to sing it and hear it and really establish that relationship between what you're writing and what these sounds really are, by the way. So that's why I go out of my way to sing some stuff, even though I'm not good at it. Um, but it's because it's important. So that C sharp is not in the key, but you can't tell that because the key signature is lying to us. This F natural, on the other hand, really is outside the key because this G7 is also a secondary dominant. This is 5 of 4. So this G7, that F natural, is indeed outside the key of G. But these C naturals, they shouldn't have required an accidental. Had the key signature been G, this C would not have required the accidental. So that's just in terms of being able to recognize the harmony by looking at the parts and recognizing when you've got to go outside the key. If you're a singer, knowing when you're going outside the key is actually it's an important part of sight singing, is recognizing, hey, I'm in the key, I'm not in the key, and being able to do solfege if you do that sort of thing, to recognize where in the key you are. So anyhow, that is just an observation about using the key signatures. Check on some comments here. Okay, good. Oh, Jeff, you're here. Yay. So hopefully that made sense. I would definitely recommend that. But yeah, I'm just really liking how you're treating the harmonies here. And as someone who would be singing bass on this, I'm really enjoying the bass line here. I would normally caution against treating the bass as freely as you are here because, yeah, it is not very root focused, but I can't argue with the fact that it sounds really nice. I mean, I really like the sound of this. So I think there's a lot to kind of learn from how you're able to like start right off with this first inversion G chord, which isn't what I would normally have done, and then hold on to that B as a common tone when the chord changed to E minor. Again, not the expected choice, but I think it's quite effective. This G here, is against A is the root. So this is basically an A7 in third inversion, right? That G is the seventh of the chord. We expect it to resolve down to the third, and it does at the end of the measure. But it first does something that's more interesting melodically, which is going up to A. G, A, F sharp, G. I mean, I like that as a melody. It's the kind of thing that you would normally writing for alto or tenor, so why not let the bass have those kind of melodies? It's kind of limiting giving the bass just, mostly roots. So while this isn't a traditional treatment, I think it's quite effective. And the one other thing that I really wanted to point out about the harmonization here was this diminished chord here. So here, um, this diminished chord that you're calling G diminished, you want to be careful about what you call the chord or how you spell the notes in the chord is maybe a better way of looking at it. Um, in that, really, this chord, a diminished chord, they're what's called symmetric, right? G diminished, B flat or A sharp diminished, C sharp or D flat diminished, and E diminished all have the same four notes. G, B flat, C sharp, E. If I'm singing it all in pitch, which I may or may not be, let me flip over to MuseScore and make that a little better. Uh, ah, G flat. Let me put up the keyboard and then C sharp, E. There we go. So that diminished chord could be a G diminished chord or a B flat diminished or a C sharp diminished or an E. They all have the same four notes. So you want to think about the proper spelling given the context. And what the proper spelling is usually is based on which is giving you the actual root resolution that you want. Here, you're calling this G diminished resolving to G, which is a thing, but I don't think it's this thing. In other words, especially given the fact that you've got the B in the bass, um, and you don't even have a G. You're calling this a G chord, but you don't have a G in it. That's because you're really telling me about B minor here. Hearing the B in the bass, and that B is actually doubled, and then we have Ds and no Gs. Well, we get a G later in the measure, but still, on the downbeat, I am hearing basically a B minor chord. I don't hear the fifth F sharp, but I really hear the B minor. I hear the three chord, or I hear the one chord in first inversion. But in any case, B is the bass note that I'm approaching. A sharp is the traditional approach that you would approach that bass note from half step from below. So normally, this diminished chord would be voiced with the A sharp in the bass. So the bass could go G, A sharp, B, B, G, B, C, A sharp, B, that bottom, that leading tone into the B. So whether or not you actually put that A sharp in the bass, I would recommend you do personally. Um, but whether or not you do, that is the root of this diminished chord. This is really an A sharp diminished chord. And then if you choose to put the E in the bass, that's okay. Then you could call it A sharp diminished with E in the bass. But you might consider, as much as I was saying I like the melodicism of what was happening elsewhere in the bass, I think having the A sharp actually approach that B the way it's normally done is probably for the best there. And then the same thing basically happens here. All right, the same exact sound here. Now here you're giving the organ the G in the bass and holding on to it. So now I can more easily buy that that's one diminished going to one, because as I said, it is a thing. It's just not the thing I was hearing in that other spot. So you'd have to maybe give yourself like a moment to think about whether that's the particular um, thing you want. So, okay, so yeah, D is being the traditional for bagpipes. So let's come back to bagpipes. I know very little about how bagpipes work. I understand that they are considered transposing instrument and they sound a half step different than they're written, but that the way it works is differently than other transposing instruments, and it makes my brain explode every time someone tries to explain it to me. So if someone wants to try to explain to me the transposition of bagpipes, I'd love to hear it. I also want to know more about the grace note thing because I know that's a thing, right? I know in MuseScore we have an entire bagpipe embellishments palette. Let's add it here for a moment. Um, Here that has all of these grace note combinations because there's very specific things based on how the instrument is constructed, very specific combinations of grace notes that can be played that are very traditional. And to be honest, it's all Scottish to me. It's all Greek to me is the expression, but I don't really know. So if D is the traditional thing, I don't know. Like this G go as a grace note into the A creates a really interesting sound, right? These G's, I mean, you're writing in the key signature of D, but like I said, the melody is really in um A. 1 1 1 3 2 1 2 3 2 1, or do 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 mi re do re. If you're using a movable do solfege, this G natural is outside the key. And to some extent, I associate that sound with bagpipe music, but I don't know the conventions. I don't know the theories of like how bagpipe music is usually conceived of that and how normal that particular combination would be to use this G natural to approach A, to basically use this flatted seventh is what that is. If A is our tonic, we expect G sharps in the key. G is like a flatted seventh scale degree. It's te in the solfege sense. So, in that traditional tonal sense, this is an unusual choice, but again, it feels bagpipey to me in ways that I don't understand all the conventions. So, um, again, I'm like totally interested to hear uh, anyone who can really explain this. So I think what happens with the bagpipes, I could be wrong. You're blowing into this tube and you've got these keys, and I think there's like a little side thing you hit that just breaks the airstream and creates those um yeah, I'm just making stuff up. I don't actually know. But yeah, that's a thing. Yong, yong, right? There's that yong sound that you get all the time in bagpipes, and it's quite traditional. And the way it's notated and what the specific pitches are is sort of dictated by how the instrument is constructed. You cannot play anything you want on bagpipes. It can only play certain sets of pitches and certain combinations because of how it's constructed. So uh, the way these grace notes tend to work is kind of dictated by that. And so you have all these conventions that's really specific to bagpipe music. So, anyhow, those are some of the things that I want to talk about on here. And then once the instrumental accompaniment comes in, it's really the instrumental accompaniment is much more, I would say, sort of traditional as far as looking at like that G chord. Again, the voices has that B in the bass, but the organ has G's in the bass, right? So it's more root position focused. E, G, E, A, D, G, B, C, right? That's a bass line, right? That's the kind of bass line you expect. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, and then 1 in first inversion, and then 4. That's a line. That's the thing that you sort of expect to see in the bass. And so I really like how the vocal bass is getting to do something else, but then the organ reestablishes. Oh no, no, no! We're gonna put in more fundamentals, more roots into this sound, and really the types of things going on um, are the kinds of things you sort of expect to see um, harmonically and all. Other than again the secondary dominant, I really like that choice. It's the kind of choice that I would and probably did make in my version. Do I have any secondary dominant? Oh, I chose to do a secondary dominant here. In the second half of the first measure instead of in the second measure. I originally had my G7, my 5 of 5 in the second full measure, but I eventually decided, know what, that's what they were expecting. So I decided, hey, I'm going to do something a little different and put my secondary dominant here in the middle of the first measure. It's a delayed resolution to the 5. So anyhow, yeah, and I don't come back to that melody, so you don't get to find out if I would have done it differently the second time. So in any case, Jeff, I really like the arrangement, and I like that we get to sort of tie up a little bit of the New Year's celebration by taking a look at some music there. Okay, so there's a whole lot of music that people have posted that I want to talk about briefly. And I also want to, some of it I'm going to hold off on and talk about maybe next week. But I also want to talk about a new little wrinkle, not a wrinkle, it's just a thing that came up in my life that's going to be relevant to what we're going to be dealing with here. So before I go into that, I want to go with where's Kika's piece? Kika, here we go. All right, so Kika wrote this really interesting piece of music here, specifically with lyrics that are, uh, bringing in my name. So anyhow, it's we're not going to hear the singing of it, but I can't not play it, right? Because it's got my name in it. So so let's hear this. I'm gonna play Kika's piece and talk a little bit about it, and then I'm gonna tell you about this new thing going on here. So let me make sure. Kika, are you around, by the way? Okay, good. I'm glad to see some discussion of the bagpipes here, and we'll come back on here. Um, I will comment about Dean's comment about the bass being an octave low. Yeah, it's a little muddy, maybe, but I don't know. This is one of these things that you don't want to listen to MuseScore's accompaniment to tell playback to tell you these things. You'd want to hear it in real life, and you might be right. If the bass is playing all these thirds and sevenths and other chord tones while the organ is trying to pound out some roots, it might be a little muddy. You might very well be right about that. Taking the bass up an octave would fix that if that's a way of fixing it, but then you'd want to rejiggle the rest of the voices too. All right, so Kika, glad you're here. Let's hear your piece. That is so fun. I love the lyrics. I mean, I looked at the lyrics, but it was fun to just watch the lyrics and imagine singing them as they went by. So obviously, there's um, references to stuff that I was doing in a previous session here. So uh, there is so much going on musically in this piece, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but then I'm going to use it as a launching point to talk about the next thing. So, first of all, obviously, it's not tonal in the sense of like most of the other music that we've looked at. It doesn't have a clear sense of a key and chords that, create 2-5-1 chord progressions and all that kind of stuff. That's not the language being spoken here. That said, if you follow that bass line, triad. Bum bum boodle. Bum bum boodoo bum 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 boo bum 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 bum. Right? It's got a tonal foundation here of this F triad for a good chunk of it, right? It's like 8 measures worth of that F triad before it starts going doo da bum ba ah 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 ah. And it keeps coming back to that F. So we got some chromaticism here happening, but it keeps coming back to that F triad while doing all this other really deeper chromatic stuff, more deeply chromatic. Dee-dee-dee-dee. These little figures that are happening here that are more half step focused and not about establishing a key. That said, it's still the case that uh, like even looking at the top melody here, it this melody uh, this melody is not too far removed from the key of B flat. I mean, from the key of F, right? If you think about a key of F, we're going to have a B flat. And here we've got an A sharp that might have been a B flat, right? This C sharp is not that far removed from the key. It's only one note in that whole initial melody that's outside the key of F. Furthermore, if you think about the key of F as having a relative minor, D minor, this C sharp would be the leading tone. And so not that this melody feels like it's in D minor, not by any stretch. I'm not claiming that, but I am claiming that the relationships of these melody notes is not uh, out is not far outside the tonal vocabulary. These melody notes come from a D minor scale and therefore are singable in the same sense that any other D minor melody would be singable. Um, Even when we have these big leaps here, I can sing that, right? I am not a singer, and I sang that thing. Um, these are the harder lines. These ones that have these combinations of half steps and then whole steps and half steps that do interlocking things. That's the hard stuff to sing, and that's the kind of stuff. Like a couple of my Christmas song arrangements, I wrote a few lines like that, and they're they're really difficult to sing. So the point is that even though when we're combining things in a way that's fairly atonal and has a lot of chromaticism and a lot of dissonance happening, uh, making the parts have good voice leading within them like this and have clear sense of what a melody is, even if it's not Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, not a simple melody, it's still an approachable melody. And it's a series of melodies that are, each have their own validity, right? This melody here in the top part and this melody here in the alto and cello here. These two pieces, this little passage, those eighth notes are working together. Right, dee-doo-doo-doo-dum figure here. But then there's this counterpoint happening because these two voices are working together rhythmically, uh, but then the soprano melody and the bass are doing something different rhythmically. So there's essentially four different rhythmic things happening, but at most points in the piece, there's no more than three different ones. So, like here, we have these two voices, soprano and alto, doing essentially the same thing rhythmically. Here, the alto's resting, but it's the cello and I'll call it the tenor voice, the cello here, that's basically a tenor voice, that have the same thing going on rhythmically. Here, it's the soprano and alto doing the same thing rhythmically. So, for the most part, there's good alignment. Um, well, there's always good alignment, but for the most part, there is some sort of alignment that says two voices are doing something similar rhythmically, and then two other voices are doing something else. So it's essentially a three voice texture rhythmically, if that makes sense. In other words, there's no more than three different things happening rhythmically at any point. And not that that's like, oh, you have to strive for that. Not that it would be bad to have four different things happen rhythmically, but it helps give the piece a little more cohesion than it might otherwise have, given the degree of atonality that's happening. Um, it it would feel that much more disjointed to a lot of ears, I think, if you had to hear four different things happening all the time. But mostly it's at most three, and often it's really just two, right? Because maybe two voices are resting, or one voice is resting. Like here, one voice is resting while two voices are doing something similar. Even in here, when we have four voices, here I would say the tenor and bass are fairly compatible. The half note here is aligned with the quarter note there. The quarter note here aligned with the quarter note there. So anyhow, these sorts of details are what you want to be paying attention to when you're writing music in this type of harmonic language, because then we're not talking about secondary dominance. We're not talking about the whether you're using first inversion or third inversion or root position. That is not the types of decisions that are being made. Instead, the decisions that we're making are controlling texture and saying, hey, let's bring these two voices together in a similar type of texture, a similar rhythm, so that we have that as an organizing principle on things. So, Susan, STEM. Let's see. Susan, you use it. Okay, so STEM. Uh, oh, I see what you're talking about here. Because I was going to say, well, STEM, that's the thing coming off a note, right? You have a note head and you have a stem. But it's the fact that the top voice is called STEM. I'm going to make a guess that it's perhaps an abbreviation in Polish. Kika, you could speak to that. Um, so could guess that this is a either the word in Polish or a an abbreviation, but I can tell you another context while we wait to see if Kika comes up with an answer. STEM is a term that gets used in the digital audio world. In other words, if you're creating, like, if I don't remember, Susan, if you participated. I should remember all the names, but when I did that We Gather Together project and we all went over to BandLab and recorded all those individual tracks, the term stem is often used for those tracks. And sometimes we'll talk about sharing a stem file that has like all the individual audio files combined with all the effects that are applied to them. So a stem in the digital audio world is basically one audio track combined with whatever processing is applied to it. And so if someone was recording something into a digital audio workstation like BandLab or like, you know, Logic Pro or Pro Tools or any of these high-end digital audio recording tools, uh, STEM is a term that gets used in that context. So I could imagine that Kika recorded this into Pro Tools and then downloaded that as a stem, but I think that's not the answer. I think it really is a Polish thing, is my guess. So there you go. Voice. Okay, Dutch. Sorry, I don't know where I got Polish from, except that looks Polish to me. But I think I maybe knew that you were Dutch, but maybe not. Um, so I guess the SZK kind of thing looks Polish-ish to me, but Grotzkopf, something head. Um, those are some of the things that I want to talk about. So now, Sheila, and again, I really apologize for not being able to pronounce anyone's names necessarily. Um, but Chela brings up the word polyrhythmic, the idea of having multiple rhythms at once. And yes, that's what's happening here. This is a very polyrhythmic texture compared to what we've been talking about. What we were talking about with Auld Lang Syne, both my arrangement and Jeff's arrangement, are very what we would call homophonic. This is every single part has the same rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. It's that same rhythm, except, maybe one passing tone, like ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Two eighth notes in the soprano, ba-da-dum, while the alto has just quarter note, and the tenor has quarter note, and the bass has quarter note. Oh, by the way, you have a doubled leading tone there. That's something to maybe think about whether that's what you really want. But luckily, you avoided the parallel octaves that would happen if you did that, if you had taken this F sharp in the tenor to a G also. Let's just hear that. G, E, C sharp, C, F sharp, G, right? That F sharp normally would go to G, but you took it down to B. But if you had taken that F sharp to G, it would have doubled the bass, which is on F sharp, also going up to G. Um, um, my point is that this is homophonic, meaning only one, basically, or one thing happening at a time. All the voices have the same rhythm, more or less. Whereas Kika's piece is polyphonic, and in particular polyrhythmic, yeah, different rhythms happening, but just more generally, we can talk about polyphony, polyphonic, meaning more than one part happening at once that are really independent rhythmically, um, as opposed to homophonic, where all the different parts might be melodically, independent. They have different pitches. One might be going up, one's going down. They're at different pitch levels. One's going in steps, one's leaping, but they all have the same rhythm. We still call that homophonic. Polyphonic is when you really allow them to have different rhythms, and that's when you really have a sense of independence in between your parts. And this is what leads to the thing that I said is going to become kind of an organizing uh, feature for me over the next several months. So I teach in a number of different contexts, right? I do these online things here. I have my online courses that I have, like the harmony course that I keep encouraging people to sign up for. Just because it's really, I'm just really proud of it. I think it does covers the material really well. But it's like a pre-recorded course, and that's a good way of learning. I do these live sessions, but I also teach live, like in person, when that's a thing, right? Or via Zoom. Now at a university here, there's Regis University here in Denver, and I teach a couple different courses there. I've taught like 4, 5, 6 courses over the years there, and one course that I teach occasionally, but only like once every 3 years, because usually there's no one who signs up for the course. And every few years, someone signs up for it because their major requires it. And it's a counterpoint course. Just yesterday, I was asked to teach that course again because someone had signed up for it. And the other professor who thought she was going to teach it, turns out she can't. So I'm going to teach the counterpoint course again. It'll be my, I think, fourth time teaching it. And it'll just be the one student. So it's basically a private lesson for that student. In the process of teaching that course, I think I'm going to use that as sort of an excuse to develop. Okay, Chayla, great. Um, so um, I'm going to use the fact that I'm going to be teaching this student a counterpoint class as an excuse to maybe create my own online counterpoint course. It's one of the courses I've been wanting to create. I've had in my mind at least 3 different courses. I want to do a jazz piano course. I want to do an ear training course. There's a few different things I want to do, but now I think I got to do a counterpoint one because the course that I teach, we don't have a good textbook for it. And the reason is usually counterpoint, when it's taught at the college level, is separated into 2 separate courses. You'd have one course where you deal with Renaissance. If you Those of you who are here for the very first one of these sessions that I did. The very first public master class, because I had sort of a private master class that I was doing before, um, only for people who were like site members on my site. Uh, and when I first opened it up and started doing these via these YouTube live broadcasts, the very first session, someone had submitted a piece that was a Renaissance motet style. And I dug deep into that thing and talked all about the use of imitative counterpoint in that piece. Some of you may remember that. If not, go back and watch it. It was kind of fascinating that right off the bat, that was what we dealt with. And that whole Renaissance counterpoint is usually an entire semester course unto itself, if not two. And then there would be a second entire semester or two on Baroque counterpoint. In other words, Bach fugues is like to put just to a fine point on it. There's doing things that are in the style of Renaissance church music, and then there's doing stuff in the style of a Bach fugue. And usually these are totally separate courses taught over 2 semesters, maybe 3 or 4. Well, at Regis we don't have it's the program isn't that big. We can't do that. We basically have one counterpoint class and one person signs up for it every 3 years or so. And we try to cover Renaissance and Baroque counterpoint in one semester. So it's really difficult to cover them both in one semester using traditional textbooks, because most of the textbooks they move too slowly, they go too deep into the woods on certain details. They don't focus enough on the connections between the two, because they're not focused on that. They're like, hey, let's live in the Renaissance world for a while. And then there'll be a whole separate textbook. Let's live in the Baroque world for a while. And often the textbooks aren't written by the same people even. And so there's very few people who have written both textbooks, both a Renaissance and a Baroque textbook. And even when they do that, they're not necessarily consistent in their own language, because they're trying to live in the Renaissance world, live in the Baroque world, rather than taking this bigger picture and say, hey, counterpoint's counterpoint. Let's look at how to apply it in a Renaissance style. Let's look at how to apply it in a Baroque style. And maybe let's look at how to apply it in modern styles as well. And so Kika's piece here is doing that. I mean, this isn't imitative counterpoint, which for whatever reason, when you study counterpoint, most of what you study is imitative counterpoint, meaning when a second voice enters, like, this piece started off with that bass, bum, 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 ba bum, 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 bum. And then the next voice enters in imitative counterpoint would be entering with that same figure, but, displaced rhythmically or displaced harmonically so that they weren't in unison. Imitative counterpoint is what that's about, and most counterpoint focuses on imitative counterpoint because it's what people do when they're writing this. But counterpoint doesn't mean imitation; it's just commonly associated with it. So anyhow, the idea of counterpoint is all over Kika's piece here. It's just not imitative counterpoint, unless it is, and I'm missing it. But I don't see obvious signs of imitative counterpoint. You can correct me if I'm wrong and point some out, and then I'll happily share that with people. But I want to show you a couple examples of Gijs, thank you for the um, uh, thanks for the kind words there. All right, on the harmony course. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of pieces that show you different aspects of counterpoint. So in that first piece that we had looked at, um, it had yeah, it was a Renaissance style motet, and I'm not gonna go back to that right now because I just want to flip and show you a few other things. I want to show you a little bit of a Baroque style fugue that I wrote when I was studying counterpoint is part of my master's degree in composition. That is what my degree is in. I have a computer science degree and I have a composition degree. So I took a counterpoint course, specifically a Baroque counterpoint course. I'd taken an undergraduate one in more Renaissance style. So let's listen to a little bit of my fugue here, and then I'm going to show you a couple other things that you might do. This was meant to be as Baroque, you know, legit Baroque sounding as I could make it. All right, I'm going to stop it right there. That is the whole first section of the fugue. It introduced the voices one at a time, right? We started with the second violin. It's a 4-measure thing. It's called the subject, or it's 2.5 measures. Sorry. Then so that figure, that that figure is the same figure we have here. Right? It's the same figure there. And then when the bass enters here, the cello, same thing again. This started on D, just like the second violin did. When the first violin enters, it enters on A, and so some of the interval relationships are different. This is all textbook writing a Baroque fugue stuff. I want to talk about how I then maybe take that idea and apply it to something that's maybe a little less Baroque. So I'm going to show you two different examples, or a couple different examples that I have done, and this to me is what makes I don't know. This becomes like a fascination that you can develop. Some of you have maybe seen this piece before, Different Worlds. I just added it to the group, so you can access it from there. If you go to the mixer, you can select my piano version, so you can hear me play the thing on the piano, and that's what we're going to hear a little bit of right now. Right, I'm going to pause there. That section that we heard is the analog of what we heard of my more Baroque sounding piece. This is what some, yeah, there's a lot of technical terms that get used, but I'll call it the exposition here. It's the initial statement of this melodic theme, which in this case is like an 8-measure theme, and then we get 8 measures of it coming in the right hand, and then we get 8 measures of it coming in again in a top voice. So it's a 3-voice texture. Each of these 3 voices states this 8-measure theme, and then we go into an improvisation. I'm improvising based on the chord progression that is happening here. Like if we go here, B flat minor, C, C, F. And that's exactly what's happening here. F, B flat minor, C, F, E flat 7, A flat 7. It's the same basic chord progression. I amended it slightly for improvisation purposes. And it's not the chord progression isn't the same for each of the 3 statements of the melody, because when the melody comes in the second voice, I've mentioned it doesn't come in at the same pitch level. It comes in on scale degree 5. And so I'm actually using a 5 chord here. So the first phrase starts with the 1 chord, F minor. The second phrase starts with the 5 chord, C. And then the third phrase starts with F minor again. And that is what I improvise over. So I'm now improvising over that chord progression. Sorry. So I improvise over that chord progression in a jazz style. I mean, there's nothing at this point that's remotely fugue about it. It's just a jazz improvisation built on that chord progression. By the way, Claude Bolling is one jazz musician who's known for doing this and integrating fugues and jazz improvisation. He just died a few days ago, so it's sort of an interesting kind of coincidence that I'm thinking about this piece at this moment. But in any case, after all that improvisation, I come back. Let's hear a little more. No, I wanted to go here. Sorry. And then it repeats, right? But I then go on and bring in the original theme again, not in the jazz sense of, oh, we're going to play the same melody at the to take it out at the end. I weave the theme in to improvisation. So listen to what's happening here. That ba-da-da-doo-dum, boo-doo-da-bum. Then in the second voice, ba-da-da-doo-da, I get that same phrase entering before the first one has finished. That's called stretto when that happens. The second voice is entering before the first one's finished, and they're overlapping. That's a fugue writing technique. And so I use that stretto technique, and then I bring in a third voice here. And then I go into some more improvisation. Then I bring in that phrase again. I'm bringing in this phrase, that same melody in different stretto combinations, interwoven with improvisation. So that's that whole section. And then I do just play the melody out at the end like it was a regular old jazz piece. So the point is here. So thank you. Thanks for the comments. Yeah, you feel free to listen to the whole thing online. I've got a couple different versions on YouTube also that you could probably catch. This was me, like, just a few days after I wrote the thing. I think I play it more freely now. Less. I mean, that if you're watching my foot, I'm sitting there like trying to keep time with the thing. I play it more maybe romantically now, more like it was something written by Chopin rather than something written by Bach, but also as if it's played by Bill Evans. So anyhow, it was yeah, so I'm freer with it rhythmically. I play exactly note for note that whole first page, but I typically push and pull the tempo more. I'm freer with how I interpret it there. So anyhow, the idea is I'm taking these techniques that you learn about in a Baroque counterpoint course, but applying it to a jazz setting. The idea is that this stuff doesn't, we don't have to put these things into separate boxes. There's Renaissance counterpoint, there's Baroque counterpoint, and then there's jazz counterpoint, which is only barely a thing. Um, but counterpoint is counterpoint. Techniques can be used in different ways and combined in different ways. And it's ironic. The title "Different Worlds." You might think that I came up with that title because I was thinking about the different worlds of jazz and classical music. No, it is not where that title came from. The title comes from the fact that when I wrote it, I was thinking, wow, this is a kind of a poignant piece. It's like, this is like like this really sad piece of like someone, striving to reach the top of Mount Everest and, dying before they hit the top. I mean, it's a tragic sounding piece to me. And so I was trying to come up with something that would convey that. And I'm like doing all these uh searches for phrases and imagery around this idea of that. And then I was like, well, okay, maybe not dying on a mountaintop, but maybe the idea of unrequited love, right? If I don't even know if that's how you pronounce that word because I've never heard it said before, but the idea of someone who's pining for someone, and in the end that they don't get the girl or whatever. And in my search for that, I came up with like the world's most awesome Far Side comic strip that I always loved. And it consists of this guy lying in bed, and he's lying there in bed thinking, I should call her. I really like her. I mean, I should just call her on the phone, but she probably doesn't know I exist. Damn it. But maybe if I called her up and just told her I loved her, and I really should call, but she doesn't even know I exist. Dang. Meanwhile, other half of the panel is this woman lying in bed, and it's the girl, and she's lying in bed and she's thinking, I think I really like vanilla. And the caption underneath says, "Same planet, different worlds." That is where that title came from. It's just it's just that much more amazing to me that it also ends up getting to have this dual meaning of combining jazz and classical influences. So anyhow, my head is going to be dealing with counterpoint over these next few months as I immerse myself in teaching it to this student, and maybe starting to develop my own counterpoint course, because I started to say there's not a lot of textbooks out there that try to combine these in any reasonable way, and so I end up augmenting things with my own handouts and stuff, and I think I'm just going to make the effort to do that. So I will say, by the time I'm done with this, I will probably have a whole counterpoint course that people can sign up for. If anyone is signing up for my site membership, the all access membership thing, the monthly business that I have going on there, then as I start posting stuff, you'll see it, and so I will gladly accept feedback on stuff as I post it. But I don't have any concrete plans. They just asked me to do this yesterday. But I'm just telling you, I'm going to be thinking about this a lot. So I'll probably be doing demonstrations and giving you kind of challenge assignments based on the idea of counterpoint, which, is all like suddenly dropped in my lap yesterday. So, anyhow, I hope that you've enjoyed this session. We looked at a few different things, and tons more music that people have submitted and will be submitting, I'm sure, in the coming week, that we'll get to talk about next week. Um, and as always, just keep creating music, post it. Go ahead and post it to the Music Masterclass group on MuseScore.com, assuming you created it in MuseScore. And that's the easiest place for me to find it, because if it's there in the group, I just see it. Wolfram, tell me about your problem real quick, and I can try to answer it. So if you've posted it to the Music Masterclass group here, this is where you want to go. Let's paste it in here. Then this is where I can see your pieces that you have submitted and give my feedback on them. And yes, you can post them within the Music Masterclass on my site also. Um, I'm looking at other options of places that we can maybe combine all these things, because I'm still experimenting with what the best way of organizing all of this is. But in any case, keep posting the music. And if I have one person who posted something here, and I want to get some feedback and find out what this is. So Marcos, if you're around, I definitely want to talk about your piece here that you've posted to SoundCloud, but I want to understand more about what it is that I'm hearing, because I don't know if this is your own original composition or if you are playing written sheet music. I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to leave a comment here and find out so I can comment appropriately next time. Um, uh, so yeah, anything having to do with send to YouTube from MuseScore.com, I have no insight into that. I have no connection to MuseScore.com other than being a user of the site. So you'd have to go to the ImprovingMuseScore.com group on MuseScore.com to find out more about how that works. But I'm pretty sure YouTube doesn't allow you to update videos, right? YouTube has no concept of updating a video. There's not even having anything to do with MuseScore. You cannot go in and replace your own video. And I think it's because they're worried that maybe people's comments will no longer apply. So YouTube just doesn't allow it. So yeah, you have no choice but to get a new video. That's just the way it works. That much I can tell you. There's nothing MuseScore.com can do about it. But yeah, delete the old version. So anyhow, again, hope you all enjoyed this session, and we'll be back next week with kind of more of the same. And I'll do a demonstration having to do with this counterpoint business, and we'll just keep. I won't necessarily talk about nothing but counterpoint for the next 3 months, but I'll definitely be talking about it some. So post whatever you want, and I will love to be checking out your music and giving comments, and just keep doing what we're doing. So, yeah, chocolate is definitely what I would have picked too. But in any case, I will talk to you all next week. And until then, have a great week and happy music making.